I did. How about you? Good.
You get sweated one of these days, man. Hey, Miss
Hello.
Vacation Lady.
How are you?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
Good.
Oh, man. Oh, mercy. So,
Good, made
we
it.
had,
No, I'm pretty heavy.
I just didn't even bother to bring an umbrella. I'll just dash.
Who's not gonna make? I know Cheryl's not gonna read.
Lindsay's going to be online. Sam is going to be online. Monica's here, so I guess that's it.
Okay.
Just the two of them. Oh, glasses. I knew I was forgetting something.
Who printed that out?
I don't know. Melissa, I guess.
This is something new.
Maybe. It's just in case the call gets out.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, that is exactly it.
Oh, well, there you
Melissa
go.
is extremely prepared.
Yeah.
And so she had all of this reduced to paper. So if there's, or if there's like sometimes there's a surge and it can disrupt the internet even if we have power.
Right.
It goes off on your computer, we'll still have the paper.
Right.
Well, no,
Maybe two people.
I think some will be,
Especially with what's going on.
because they're going to want to know about the dates for applying.
Oh, sure. You have to still document that.
But,
So I wanted to ask you, I've talked to you both about the committee assignments, but one thing that I was looking at that was a little bit uneven. Well, and I haven't mistaken it anyway. I put Lynn, but it's actually Lindsay. Wing, I wanted to ask you, right now I have you on facilities, and then student achievement, and then vice chair here, but I don't know where the District 4 person might go. I had three potential places: facilities, student achievement, which you're already on, or down here on engagement. Do you have a preference between these, or alternatively, I might be able to move Lindsay over there? But I forgot when I was planning that we had the person coming on.
So this is a new.
That's the new one. That's going to be more about volunteerism, working with local governments, trying to do more public forums, things like that. I mean, I expect everyone will come to this one.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's a formality, if anything by your name would look better than another. But, and I didn't mean to throw it on you as a snap decision either. Or you
Yeah,
can wait
let me
till the
think
new
about
person
it.
comes on.
Yeah, let me think about it.
Okay. So I'll assign you one, but know that it's flexible.
Yeah.
Okay? All right.
Okay.
Thanks.
I'm doing well. So I grew up in Houston, so I've survived hurricanes and, tornadoes, flooding. I lived in New York, so I survived snowstorms.
my biggest fear is a tree in me or on
Oh,
me.
been there, done that.
Like in my path or on me. That's,
Yeah.
flooding, hydroponics.
I know not to drive into water. Yeah.
Right, right, right.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No joke. Yeah.
Oh, I know. I know. Yeah. Right. Yeah, like 1 hour from the coast. Yeah. So I mean, I grew up there. You know, flooding was somewhat of an issue, but it was not never terrible. But yeah, one hurricane a few years ago, my sister still lives in Houston, and they lived in that same house for 30 years. And this time around, it flooded up to their knee in their house. So they had to go to their next door neighbors who have the second story to seek shelter. And that was the worst kind that they have ever experienced. Yeah. Yeah. Got the wrong laptop out. They're called IT people. My laptop, when I try to shut it down, it just keeps on spinning. And it won't shut down. Huh. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Is Harrison back here or? Yes.
All right, now I feel so much safer.
I don't know if I would call that safe. I'll do what I can though.
too.
had a break.
Me too.
There wasn't anything that I was.
You're on the wrong side.
She's on the right side for kids, though.
That's right. Just as soon as we
And
get
family.
everyone online, we'll start, okay?
Yes.
To get on here, and then they have someone monitoring back there, so if the WebEx person speaks, they'll switch to them. But
I just spoke with her. She's logging in right now. She had to reinstall.
Okay, and should I log in too so I can see them, or will that be?
I don't think you need to. I think if you do, it'll mess it up. But we just double check. Chris, you're right. Log in so that you can see if Cheryl raises her hand.
Okay.
But you're gonna put it on
Keep
mute.
everything muted and, all right. All right, I see Sam, I see Lindsay. I see Mr. Scott.
See you, sir. How are you today?
Hey, that's all friends.
Including the
Including
weather.
the weather. I was just about to say, Mr. Smith, you have the weather.
We've got the boats and I guess how
Chris is only logging into that so he can see if, you don't need to log in.
Oh, this is shit.
I just looked at you, I said, what is this? She left early.
I just assumed.
Yeah, she left early that night.
Y'all a miracle worker.
We got you. All the way over here.
Change it to this side.
All right. All right, everyone, welcome. It is a rainy Tuesday, today, January 9th. Thank you for coming. We have a special called meeting of our Board of Education, and we have several important matters that we'll attend to today. Thank you for braving the weather. We do have present Dr. Ng, Ms. Edmonds, myself, Ms. Johnson-Hostler, and Mr. Swanson in person, but we are also joined virtually by Ms. Mahaffey, Mr. Hershey, and Ms. Caulfield is in the process of logging in, just experiencing some technical difficulties. But we will be excited to have her online soon. So as we start every meeting, let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So as I did note our membership, you heard the names, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us here in person and 3 of us online. That is because we have a vacancy. We have a hole here on the board table, and we're going to address that very shortly. However, before we do, we determined that we do have a quorum, and Mr. Swanson, I believe you have a motion.
Yes, sir, Chair Hagerty. I would like to make the following motion. Number 1, to amend the agenda to move, sorry, let me say this correctly with my glasses that I don't have. To amend the agenda to move the discussion to fill District 4 board member vacancy from an information item to an action item, and pursuant to Board Policy 2420 to temporarily suspend Policy 2200 and 2324 to allow the board to proceed with the election of a vice chair at today's meeting without the use of written ballots.
Thank you, Mr. Swanson. Is there a second for the motion?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson-Hostler. This is an important motion for us because as a special called meeting, normally we have these elections during our annual meeting, but we need to fill this during this special called meeting. Also, typically, by policy, we would be voting by paper ballot, but because we have some virtual members, that we will have to vote by roll call, if everyone understands the motion. Is there any discussion or any questions? If not, what I'd like to do is I will then call the roll call vote on the motion. I will start with Mr. Hershey.
Aye.
As an aye for Mr. Hershey. Dr. Ng?
Aye.
Ms. Edmonds?
Aye.
Ms. Mahaffey?
Aye.
An aye for Ms. Mahaffey. Ms. Johnson-Hostler?
Aye.
Mr. Swanson?
Aye.
Ms. Caulfield, if you're online yet? All right, Ms. Caulfield is still working to get online, and an aye from the chair. All right, the motion passes. We will now go forward, we have amended the agenda. Is there an approval of the amended meeting agenda you see before you?
Are you asking if we need to make a motion to approve the new agenda?
Yes, sir, Mr. Hershey.
So moved.
Second.
Motion from Mr. Hershey, a second by Ms. Johnson-Hostler. All in favor of approval of the amended meeting agenda, please say aye.
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 Oh, sorry, it is
Aye.
a roll call. Mr. Hershey,
Aye.
Dr. Ing,
Aye.
Ms. Edmonds,
Aye.
Ms. Mahaffey.
Aye.
The chair says aye. Ms. Johnson-Hostler,
Aye.
Mr. Swanson,
Aye.
Ms. Caulfield. All right, the amended meeting agenda has been approved. It is a special occasion we have here. Our information item, we would like to welcome back to the Wake County Board of Education in her new capacity, our newest member of the Wake County Commission, Ms. Tara Shonda Waters. I will say before we start, we don't have a video montage. We don't have the best of highlights. But as I go back and I think about our colleague, Ms. Waters' service, I have to say I was shocked because when I looked it up, I only met you March 3rd of 2022. That is less than 2 years ago. And it just seems like you have been such a big part of this work for so much longer. I suppose that is one of the things about being on the school board and spending as much time with each other. You forge those bonds. But in less than 2 years' time, you've made a tremendous impact on all of us, I think, as a board and on us personally. For those of you who are tuning in who don't know Ms. Waters was elected our vice chair at our leadership meeting representing District 4 on the Board of Education and has recently stepped down, submitted her letter of recognition to me on January 2nd after she was nominated to fill the vacancy created by the passing of Dr. James West on the Wake County Commission. And so after submitting her resignation to me and my reluctant but also excited acceptance, Ms. Waters took her oath and became our newest county commissioner. Ms. Waters is a product of our Wake County Public Schools, proudly, Millbrook High School. And I remember the first time we met you, you brought a copy of the Millbrook High School student newspaper that you shared with us. And it's just amazing that these memories continue on and follow us through adulthood. I'm proud to say that you're a North Carolina State alum, so that Wake County education has done her well, and then also has her Master's of Public Administration. High school GED instructor, was a valuable member to us in terms of our Student Achievement Committee and our education practices, a committed advocate and a champion for DEI and inclusion and making sure that everyone felt welcome in our schools, and making sure that how we make decisions about people is not based upon how they look. And if you stick around, you might hear a little bit more about this later, but I want to continue on your legacy in terms of the work that you've done. I forgot to mention, of course, your Wake Tech adult education work and the job skill training that you do, but with your current role with Volunteer Raleigh and the work that you do in citizen engagement, trying to get more people involved in our processes. Any discussion of your good work and what you do in the community, what you've done for us, has to be balanced by the job that you do as a mother for Caleb and Christian. I know they couldn't be here today. It would have gotten them out of school, but who knew? But I'm sure they can tune back in and see this later. Ms. Waters, at the conclusion of our information item, I do have something I would like to present you with on behalf of your 8 remaining Board of Education members. but I also thought at this time, if you had any comments, you are welcome to share them from the podium.
Well, Chair Haggerty, Board Member Johnston Hostler, Board Member Swanson, Board Member Caulfield, Board Member Mahaffey, Board Member Edmonds, Board Member Dr. Ng, Board Member Hershey, our esteemed Superintendent, Dr. Taylor, and our Board Attorney, Mr. Malone. I stand before you with a heart that is completely full of gratitude for the journey that has led me to where I am today. So much of that has to do with a little school off of Spring Forest Road called East Millbrook Middle School. A real turning point in my life, being able to come and access a great education through the Wake County Public School System. And if you don't know, I had the great joy of being a co-op student at Millbrook High School and working for the district office when I was a senior in high school. My first boss, Chris Brown, retired just last year, poured so much into me and saw so much potential in me. And I was often really excited to be called down to make copies for the board and to help in those years. So many years ago, I never imagined that I'd be able to serve in that capacity. And so it's just a testament to a great education that I received in the Wake County Public School System, and also just a great opportunity to serve. I didn't have any political experience, and being afforded this opportunity to be able to advocate in such a special way has been such a gift. And I want to acknowledge all of our staff members who are here today, who are listening, and just say I am so grateful for the work that you do every single day. It benefits me personally. It benefits my children. It benefits 160,000 children in Wake County. And so I will always, always, always lament and say that you are the hardest working elected officials in all of Wake County, and it has been an extreme pleasure to serve with you. And I look forward to continuing to advocate together, to work together, to serve together, to strive together, and just continue to build an amazing school district. And so I'm here full of emotion. Some of it is absolutely sad to depart this great work in this great district, but also full of joy to be able to continue in a new seat, in a new platform, to continue the great work of building strong kids and building a strong community. So I thank you for your time. I thank you for your commitment. I thank you for your service. Everyone in this room is dear and special to me. I have a story about each of you and how kind you've all been. And so I do thank you, and I look forward to our continued journey and commitment together. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Waters. Before we present Ms. Waters with her gift, are there any comments from any of her former colleagues? Let's start with the Dean of the Delegation, Ms. Johnston-Hostel.
And you who speaks first. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Waters, I couldn't agree with our chair more. When I actually did the same thing, I actually pulled the date to see the first time that we met you when you sat before us applying for District 4. And I've said this to you. It certainly reminded me of myself of walking into a room thinking I had what it took to sit at this table, and you really have no idea what it is to sit at this table. You fulfilled everything that you said to us with your commitment to our students, your commitment to your own two students, your commitment to yourself and who you live to be as a woman of faith, a woman of integrity, a woman of deep discipline, and the ability to be diplomatic in the face of all adversity. We saw that when you chose to come sit before us just slightly less than 2 years ago, and we certainly saw it in your service for almost 2 years on this board, in the way that you worked with each one of us individually, but the way that you worked with us collectively, and the way that you ensured that not just the community that you represented, but the community of Raleigh understood that you understood your assignment was to bring in the community into this district in the most loving but also meaningful and intentional way. And I am grateful for the opportunity to work with you you, to get to know you, to call you my sister in Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, which speaks highly to the quality of women. And so I'm glad to know that this is just a new chapter in our relationship, both working professionally but also personally, that we will continue to be in partnership as you continue to support the 160,000 students, over 20,000 employees, and each of us who sit at this table, that will continue to be at your service to provide you the data, the support, the information you need to continue to fully support Wake County Public Schools, which I know aren't just words out of your mouth, but truly the words written over your heart for Wake County Public Schools as a graduate. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnston-Hostler. I know some people are torn about saying something or ending it on that strong note. Mr. Swanson, did you have any comment?
Thank you, Chair Haggerty. It's very difficult to follow Ms. Johnston-Hostler, so I will just say amen and ditto. But I just want to say, this past year that we've served together, a little more than a year, you have been that pillar of strength when I needed that, and that voice of reason, because not often, every now and then, between you and Ms. Johnston-Hostler, y'all have had to talk me down a couple of ledges, and I appreciate that. But I definitely admire your commitment to equity, making sure that we are centering the voices of those most marginalized students and community members. And that showed up every day when you sat at this table and how you advocated. And I'm honored to have also served with you as your vice chair on the Student Achievement Committee to think through how we can be intentional of disrupting these systems that have left our marginalized students behind. And your voice was definitely needed in that space, and your voice is going to be continued in these spaces. And I'm grateful that you are going to be our commissioner to continue to lift champion those equity initiatives that we have. And so I'm grateful for that. And this is not a goodbye. This is a see you later. And always know that we are colleagues, friends, and I'm honored to call you a friend and a mentor. So thank you for always being that quiet storm, and knowing how to push and to knowing when to push on these issues and to push us to think a little bit differently at how things have been presented. So I do look forward to the great things that you're going to do at the county commissioner side, and knowing that we have some true champions over there for public schools, and knowing that your voice is going to be very powerful in those conversations, not as it relates to our funding piece, but to give folks a better understanding of what we do as a district and how our commissioners can show up to support even more than how they are supporting us. So thank you for your service. And the great thing is, you don't have as many meetings on that side. And they're shorter meetings, so that gives you more time to spend with your family. So thank you so much, Ms. Waters.
Thank you, Mr. Swanson. Any on this side of the table? And then I'll go to our online. Ms. Emmons?
Thank you. Ditto and amen to both of you. You both spoke so eloquently and took a lot of the comments that I wanted to make, so I'll be brief. Thank you so much, seatmate. My very first seatmate as a new member of the board. It was an honor to serve with you, even though it was just a short time. It's obvious that we're all excited to have an advocate, former school board member, our second one on the commission. But beyond that, I cannot think of a better person to continue the legacy of Dr. West. I am so excited, not just for Wake County Public Schools, the work that you'll do on the commission in partnership with us. I know how much you will do to support children and families. The commissioners have a broad range of responsibilities, and your voice in making those decisions is just going to benefit us all. So best to you. See you soon.
Thank you, Ms. Emmons. Dr. Ng.
Hello. And I really just echo Ms. Johnson-Hostler's. I mentioned that you're a woman of faith, and I just remember the first time I met you was at the swearing in, and when your parents were here carrying the largest family Bible I had ever seen, which is a testament to their faith and your faith. So I really appreciate that you are carrying on, your testimony and your faith to a new venue, and I just look forward to working with you in a different setting. So, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ng. And then the last one I see online, Ms. Mahaffey.
Thank you, Chair Haggerty. And Ms. Waters, I'm sorry I can't be there in person, but I just want to say thank you for your service. Thank you for stepping up. You were a breath of fresh air in that interview process. Thank you for your unwavering support and advocacy for our schools, and I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the sacrifices that you make to have been on this board. I know it's not always easy as a mom to step away, and you did that and will continue to do that on the commission, and it's something that sometimes goes unrecognized when you're a parent sitting on this board. And I just want to say thank you, and I am so thrilled that you will be on our sister board, and we look forward to seeing you in that capacity. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mahaffey. So then, without any further delay, I would like to present this plaque to our former colleague, Ms. Tara Waters. Put you back in the frame. And for those who haven't had a chance to read it, it says, "Presented with sincere appreciation for your leadership, your commitment, and dedication to the Wake County Board of Education." Again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And so it's appropriate, with the reference to the family Bible, that we acknowledge there is a season for everything under heaven, and the vacancy created by Ms. Waters it will be hard to fill, but we will go forward, and we will have a two-step process. The first thing that we have to do is that we must select a new vice chair. And so with the amended motion, with the motion that Mr. Swanson had made with the waiver of policy, we will be able to go forward, make a motion at the table, and then once we have all nominations, we'll proceed to vote by voice vote. Rather than an aye or a nay, you will simply state the name of the candidate for whom you are voting. Mr. Mullen, did I get that right?
Yes, you did.
All right. So at this point in time, I would like to open nominations for the office of Vice Chair for the Wake County Board of Education. Mr. Swanson.
I would like to nominate Ms. Johnson-Hostler for Vice Chair.
Second.
Ms. Johnson-Hostler's name has been put into nomination. We have a second from Mr. Hershey. Are there any further nominations, or are there any motions? All right, then.
Chair Haggerty,
Yes, Ms. Mahaffey.
I move that we close nominations.
We have a motion for Ms. Mahaffey to close nominations. Is there a second?
Second.
I heard Ms. Edmonds first. So we will now proceed with a voice vote. Well, technically, we'll have to have a voice vote to close the nominations. So we will again go around the table. This is a vote, aye or nay, to close the nominations. Mr. Hershey.
Aye.
Dr. Ng.
Aye.
Ms. Edmonds. Aye. Ms. Mahaffey.
Aye.
The chair says aye. Ms. Johnston-Hostler.
Aye.
Mr. Swanson.
Aye.
Ms. Caulfield. Okay, so without any opposition, our nominations have been closed. So at this point, we will now go around the table, unless there is a motion to accept Ms. Johnson-Hostler by acclamation. No, we do.
Well, since you're going to have to
Do it anyway.
Yeah.
All right.
It's the same place. So.
This is why we keep Mr. Malone with us. Yeah. So I think we do have a question from Ms. Mahaffey.
Yes, I'm sure you're going to get here, but just for clarification, are we stating the name of the person
Yes.
that we would prefer, or, okay, thank you.
Yes. Just like any other ballot, like it would be the paper ballot, you may state any name which would be on the ballot, which would be any of the 8 remaining Board of Education members. All right? So we will start with Mr. Hershey,
Ms. Johnson Hostler.
Dr. Ng,
Ms. Johnson Hostler.
Ms. Edmonds,
Ms. Johnson Hostler.
Ms. Mahaffey.
Ms. Monica Johnson Hostler.
The chair votes for Ms. Monica Johnson Hostler.
Monica Johnson Hostler votes for Monica Johnson Hostler.
Monica Johnson, Miss the Monica Johnson Hostler.
And Ms. Caulfield, if you're online. All right. I believe we have all of the votes in. I will look to our attorney, Mr. Malone, for tabulation and verification.
It's unanimous.
It's unanimous that
It's unanimous that Monica is the vice chair.
All right, thank you, everyone. So I will welcome Ms. Johnson Hostler to the seat as vice chair. And we will continue with the meeting. So the next item before us is a discussion to fill the District 4 board vacancy. And you should have seen some materials in assembly, and we have some additional materials that we can discuss as well. And if we are ready, after the discussion, I would entertain a vote to go forward. Have the members had an opportunity to review the proposed timetable? You should have it online, or I can show you this document, which should be in assembly, the draft schedule for the timeline for filling the District 4 vacancy. For the benefit of everyone who may not have access to assembly, this is a timeline that follows a timeline similar to our previous District 4 vacancies. Under the proposed timeline, we would advertise the vacancy officially by posting it in the popular news outlets on January 12th, 2024. We would set an application documents deadline of February 2nd, 2024, all applications to be received by the Board of Education and by Ms. Melissa Allen by 5 p.m. And we'll talk more about the application documents in a moment. Then we would propose a special called board meeting on Tuesday, February the 13th, to interview candidates for the District 4 vacancy and to select a replacement. We can't tell you what time that would begin just yet, because that will be dependent on how many candidates that we receive for that office. And then, with a successful selection of a new representative for District 4 on February 13th, we would then welcome and swear in the new candidate at our next meeting, scheduled meeting, which would be Tuesday, February the 20th. So from the time the news outlets broke the story of Ms. Waters going to the County Commission on January 2nd, that will have been 30 days for the application documents to come in. That will give everyone about 2 weeks' notice between the document deadline to prepare for the special called meeting, so board members will be able to review application documents, and then making that selection, providing the new member a week to prepare for the swearing in, to invite any family to receive orientation and any other materials necessary for them to participate fully at our February 20th meeting. Are there any questions or discussions just with the timeline, and then we can discuss some other aspects of the nomination? Ms. Edmonds.
Thanks. Just for clarity, so the meeting on February 13th, the only agenda item would be those interviews, and then a meeting on February 20th would include a regularly scheduled board meeting?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, the meeting on the 20th is our regularly scheduled meeting. We would just simply, between, I think, the work session and the swearing, and the regular meeting, have a swearing-in ceremony. Mr. Swanson?
I just have a clarifying question. So the candidates' information, will they be loaded in Assembly, or will we receive that information prior to the 13th?
I'm just looking over to Ms. Melissa Allen for clarification. So you will have a link on a Google Drive that will be available. All right. But that, yes. All right. In terms of just the timeline for the vacancy, are there any other questions? And then the second aspect is you should see proposed vacancy announcements. There was an original one posted, and then we've also posted the vacancy announcement that we used when Ms. Waters was selected. And the second one is the one that was recommended to us by council. So as we go forward, not a formal vote on this, but by looking at these, is there a preference? Does anyone between the two? The second one specifically talks of proof of domicile in District 4 and specifically provides the documentation that would be required of all candidates just to allow us to verify and establish domicile. Okay, and then the blanks you see, all of these documents received by blank PM on blank, that is where we would put the dates from the draft timeline if we accept the draft timeline. Discussions or questions? Ms. Johnson-Hustler.
I only have one thought, and I'm sure you and Ms. Allen have thought about this. Did you all think, and this is my recommendation, is that we actually put in the bottom of the, so I prefer the second one, which is the one that we used for Ms. Waters. So I prefer we use that one, but under number 4, I would recommend that we indicate here, if you are domiciled in the district but are unable to provide the utility bill, please notify us at the email address below so we can communicate. I would actually re-enter the email here. I don't know if Ms. Allen can recall this, but we still get a lot of phone calls even if you tell people. And so I think just reiterating again, especially if people do like I do and leave the second page on their printer. So I would just say, for the sake of Ms. Allen not having to field calls, that the email is noted on both pages. And so you can put it at the bottom of the first one in number 4. But I just note that the email is only on the page 2.
Thank you, Vice Chair Johnson-Hustler. I think that's a good suggestion. Is there any general agreement? Okay. Are there any other questions or discussion about the vacancy notice? Mr. Swanson?
Do we need to decide which vacancy description we're going to go with?
Looking around the table, it sounded to me like the preference was for the second one, the one that we used for Ms. Waters. But is there any other debate or discussion? Ms. Evans?
I just want to make sure that we're talking about the same one. So I see one that is 1 page and I see one that is 2 pages, and my preference is the 2-pager. Is that correct? Is that not my preference, but I mean, is that the correct distinction?
I believe that's correct. Yes.
The one that has the number 4.
Yes.
Right, okay.
Whereas, well, the other one has a District 4 on it as well.
Well, but I mean, a paragraph 4, section 4.
Sorry, yes.
Right, okay.
Yes. The one that has the second page that Vice Chair Johnson-Hustler was referring to. All right. So then, a question from Ms. Mahaffey. Or a comment.
Chair Haggerty, I was just curious about interview questions and your timeline for that, because I did not see that in the timeline for the public.
So I wanted to ask about that. We have a couple of different options. We have, generally, our practice has been that we ask all of the candidates the same questions. That way everyone has a fair shot at the same information. I've brought applicant questions that we've used in previous District 4 interviews, or if there are new questions that you all had, we could try to incorporate any of them. What's the preference of the board? Ms. Mahaffey?
My preference would be to use the questions, but then I believe our general practice has been to update them as we see fit. And so given the fact that we have a new strategic plan, we may want to modify some of the existing questions.
I think that makes a lot of sense. What I can do is for those board members who are joining us this year who weren't involved in the past process, we have a list of those questions that we used last year, and we'll provide those to everyone to look at, and then we can take suggestions for those updates. And if you want to just send those to me and Ms. Allen, we'll look at those and get those adopted, but we'll generally then use the same framework of asking everyone the same questions. Okay? Well, then the last thing that I'll share is that typically we limit our communications with the applicants. What we'd like to do is there is a standard communication that would come to us, a standard communication that would come from Ms. Allen from the board office to all applicants, generally thanking them for applying, confirmation of the receipt of their application materials, and then scheduling a 45-minute interview on the day. The actual time to be scheduled depending on how many people that we have applied. We would then ask them to prepare an answer to a set of questions. I believe we would share the questions with them in advance, so we're not surprising anyone. Everyone would have the opportunity to come best prepared, and then just thanking them for applying for the vacant position. Is there any other information that you think should be included in that? It's generally the same letter, I think, that they used even when I came on the board. All right. Well, again, Ms. Allen will make all of this available and can share it for us. But just before we went ahead with a vote to approve the proposal, I wanted to share it with you, get your ideas and feedback. Are there any other questions or concerns about the timeline, the process for developing the questions, or anything else related to the vacancy? Dr. Ng.
This is the first time I'm going through this, obviously. What are the recommendations in terms of communication with potential candidates? Because there may be somebody that we know or somebody that doesn't know us that reach out to us. What is the appropriate thing for us to do in response?
Thank you, Dr. Ng. So that's a really good question, and different people have had different philosophies. I think, when people have talked to me about running for office, I always want to be very open with them, tell them about time commitments, expectations, and things like that. But when we're filling a vacancy by a board vote, sometimes what appearing to be helpful can look like favoritism or collusion. So my recommended practice, and I won't tell anybody what they can and can't do, but I think what I would ask is that we limit our communications to any applicants. If someone just stops you and asks you, direct them to Melissa Allen, who should have all of the technical information and knows everything there is to know about serving on the board, but she would likely be the best point of contact. That way, nobody who could be nominated will be having conversations maybe with one board member or another board member, and then other potential candidates could see that as unfair. Does that sound reasonable? Okay. All right. All right. Any other input into our process or how we go forward? All right. Well, I do want to be respectful of time and get us out of here at a good hour, and I do have two other quick things on the agenda. So what I'd like to do then is, as we've amended this to be an action item, is there a motion by the board to move forward with the draft timeline and the process as we've discussed?
So moved.
There's a motion from Ms. Edmonds, a second from Mr. Swanson. Any further discussion? All right, we'll continue with a roll call vote. Mr. Hershey?
Aye.
Dr. Ng?
Aye.
Ms. Edmonds?
Aye.
Ms. Mahaffey?
Aye.
Chair says aye. Vice Chair Johnson-Hostler?
Aye.
Mr. Swanson?
Aye.
Ms. Caulfield? All right, the motion passes. We have our draft timeline. It is now our official timeline. We will get materials uploaded. Again, you seeing the vacancy announcement, you can see where more information will be available, and we will move on for that date. Please make sure to hold as much of that February date open as possible, since we will not know exactly what time we'll need to begin until we know how many candidates that we will be interviewing. All right, our next item for discussion was a discussion of our board retreat. We've talked about having this retreat. I know that there are no times when we can, set it as a perfect time, and there will be some folks that it may not work the best for, but what I would propose to you is that we wait until we have our newest member on board, but then we try to have it as soon after that as possible. So potentially for February, we'd be looking at either that last weekend in February, which would be Friday the 23rd for half a day, and then half a day on Saturday the 24th, or potentially that next weekend, which would be Friday, March 1st, Saturday, March 2nd. I've been working with Dr. Taylor on a proposed agenda. I know that we want to do a deeper dive into Dr. Taylor's first 100 days and have a more detailed report out to the board. We want to give the board an opportunity to speak about board priorities for the coming year. We want to have a discussion about the budget and get board member participation into the development of the budget priorities, and really kind of helping people understand the budget and how it works. We'll talk a little bit about communication, and I want to talk to Vice Chair Johnson-Hostler if we have time. We may bring up a question or two about the legislative agenda, but maybe not. We're going to talk a little bit about more of that in a second. Mr. Hershey, I see your hand.
So I'm a little torn on this, but I'm a little concerned about waiting until the end of February, beginning of March to kind of lay out what we want to do for the year and touch on all the points that you just hit on. I understand the thought behind waiting for a new board member, but at the same time, they're going to be going through orientation like we all did. It's going to be a lot. And respectfully, I don't feel compelled to wait to not have a retreat for another 2 months while we go through that process, assuming we go through that process and it runs smoothly. That I would just be repeating if I said it again, but I think that I would rather have a retreat sooner than later.
You'd rather have it before the new member comes on?
Yeah, this month if we had time.
Okay.
I mean, we got a lot to do, a lot of things to talk about, and only because it's another almost 2 full months before we be looking at a retreat, and the new board member is gonna have a lot coming at them as well. So, and frankly, I don't mind doing a kind of a follow-up to the retreat with the new board member.
Well, I think those are all valid points. I will say that if we have a retreat and we're asking everyone to come and dedicate 2 more half days of time to the board, we want to make sure that the retreat is worthwhile and it's worth everyone's time. And so part of that is that we do need adequate time to prepare for the retreat, to secure facilitators if we have facilitated parts of the program. And so we need to have more than a couple weeks' notice in order to turn that around. So to me, February was as soon as we could get it and still have adequate preparation to make it a worthwhile experience for you. But at the same time, if we were going to do it in February, then it seemed by pushing it back a week or two, the value of the team building in the retreat and getting to know a new board member and integrating them into the team, seemed like if it's only a week or two difference, that we should err on that side. Dr. Taylor, you and I have talked about the retreat. I would be curious if you had any thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think the proper timing is what's going to be needed. If we accelerate that, then there are some things that we won't logistically be able to do. I know if there are concerns about budget processes, there are things that we can do prior to the retreat to get feedback from the board about budget priorities, and we can certainly do an exercise to make sure that's quality input from the board. But I would prefer that if we had due and timely notice, that we could get all the facilitators that we need, board members have time to review and make suggestions of agenda items. But at the end of the day, we work at the pleasure of the board, and we will do whichever you choose. But I think that additional time can help us out, but we can mitigate any issues that we need to address before that time period.
Okay, Mr. Swanson, I saw you had a question or comment.
Yeah. I think Dr. Taylor clarified the piece that I was going to raise. I would agree with making sure that we had, I understand Mr. Hershey's concern, and I do agree with the pieces he's made, but I think if, to the point that you made, if we're going to do something, let's do it well, versus not necessarily having all the pieces in there. And I do think it would be fair to the new person to make sure that their voices are being heard in the conversation versus feeling that they are going to be behind the 8 ball, which essentially they are. But I think we have a duty to make sure that the new District 4 representative feels as much a part of the team, although they are coming in a little bit later.
Thank you. I had a text from Ms. Caulfield. Ms. Caulfield, if you can hear me, would you like to ask your question or provide your comment? If we can't hear you, then I'll just ask you to send me your comment, and then I will read it. Ms. Caulfield, if you are speaking through the phone connection, I think you might be muted. Okay, I'm not hearing you through the speakers, and I'm not seeing a typed message. We will have more opportunities for more input about, oh, here we go. All right, the 3 dots. Ms. Caulfield is here and with us. It's like the seance. I want everyone to join hands. And apologies to Ms. Caulfield for the technology issues. Actually, if I could ask Ms. Luton to join me at the table here, she may be able to help us sort this, because I do want to get everyone's input. All right, we might have to resort to more old-fashioned technology. Hello, Ms. Caulfield.
Thank goodness for that old technology.
You are coming to us through the magic of Siri.
Okay, great. I just wanted to add that I do appreciate what Sam Hershey had to say, and I do agree with Mr. Hershey. When I heard the timeline, I understand, because we have the new person, so we're trying to kind of include it all. And have the new person come in. I do remember our famous phrase that we heard was, it's like drinking from a fire hose when we come in. So I do understand that a new person is going to have a lot coming at them. But especially with discussing things that are important, like the budget and our priorities and things like that, I feel like it might be best for us to have a both and end, as we say often, to keep it going along so that we're not closer to losing time that is closer to the first quarter of the year. And if there's a way that we can do that and incorporate the both and where we discuss all the priorities and do all of that, because even if we waited till the first week of March, I'm not sure that the new person stepping on board would have adequate time to even be able to grasp all of that.
I think those are good points, Ms. Caulfield. So at this point, with the board members having heard, and Ms. Caulfield, I'm going to leave you on the phone if you can stay with us, okay? I'll just lift the phone up to the mic when you need to speak. All right. Is there a preference among the board then for, again, I really think we do need more time to put together a good program for you. But then, I see a question from Ms. Mahaffey. Ms. Mahaffey?
And I was just anticipating if you were soliciting opinions.
Yeah, go right ahead. Comment.
Yeah, I think the both and is we can talk about the budget piece in work session, perhaps. But then I also fully understand the need to wait for things that do require a facilitator and facilitation as part of a formal retreat. So I think there's a way to accomplish both things. And so I could support the later date for a retreat while also recognizing that there are some things that we may need to do in a work session capacity prior to.
Very good points. Dr. Taylor?
Okay. So what I can do is that because we are in the budget season, we do have a budget timeline, and I have talked with David Nieder about what I want to see in terms of board engagement. So what I can do is go ahead and make sure we have that particular piece together, and then we can accelerate that, get the board feedback as it relates to the budget, but then still be able to focus on a retreat that's somewhat outside of the budget process, if that's okay.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. So, Ms. Mahaffey, again, or is your hand just still up?
Nope, just forgot to take it down.
Okay. All right. Is there any other further discussion? Ms. Edmonds?
Just quickly, I think it's also important to be mindful about a joint meeting with the county commissioners, and I would hope that that would take place sooner rather than later. So just keeping that in mind with what Dr. Taylor just suggested, because I too feel that it's pushing it out pretty far. And I, as to Ms. Caulfield's point, with all due respect to the stellar candidates I know we will get, I don't know in that rapid of a timeline how meaningful their contribution would be. That's not the right way to phrase that, but with onboarding and coming to a retreat, the team building aspect, is going to be effective regardless, but just being mindful of that joint meeting that we need to have.
Thank you. And I actually do have an agenda item in these closing remarks that will go to that. But in terms of the time, we're talking about 6 weeks from this Friday, which again, I do think we will need time to get everything together, but of course, we will still continue to be meeting and have more opportunities for participation and engagement. Vice Chair Johnson-Hostler?
And thank you, Dr. Taylor. I was actually going to speak to that point. And so thank you, Ms. Caulfield, for noting it as a both and. I guess I didn't really see it as a both and, but I think that's a great way to look at it since I live by the both and, to get through group dynamics. So one of the things that we had talked about with the budget is we'd be starting with our work session this month to start beginning to talk about the budget, as Dr. Taylor just said. My personal opinion is all of those conversations leading to either the last week in February or the first week in March really still allows us to be discussing the budget, but not in a retreat fashion. It's more of an educational learning fashion, which I think is what Dr. Taylor was mentioning that he talked to Mr. Nieder about, which I think is then great because we can give that to the candidate as a review prior to whatever date we choose the retreat, which really is boiling down to what our priorities are, where we're leaning to as a board. Generally, our joint meeting isn't until mid to late March. And essentially, by the time we get there, staff is already ready because the superintendent has already defined his budget in this case. And so I'm anticipating, based on what I know previous timelines, that this still gets us there. But I want to lift up, I think, Ms. Caulfield's point is myself as a finance committee chair and Mr. Nieder had already discussed that the budget conversations would be beginning in January. By nature that they always have to, because the superintendent generally prepares his budget to us by March.
That's right. Dr. Ng?
Yeah, I agree. I think the budget, the discussion should be starting kind of as soon as possible. But the retreat is a team building process, but also it's a good time for us to kind of get a refresher as well. My thought was, I don't know, maybe it's already on the agenda, but in terms of the ethics training part of it, could that be incorporated into the retreat as a way of reducing the training that needs for the new person, but as well as a refresher course for us?
Dr. Ng, I think that's a fantastic idea, and I think that's something that, again, we would have. What's that? But I think that is a fantastic idea, and at this point in my discussions with Dr. Taylor about an agenda, I think we could put that we could work that in. So, all right. Well, I think we've got a pretty good plan then that we will continue, of course, to go ahead and work, but we will still target an end of February date for a formal retreat type meeting, weighing all the pros and cons. So just try to hold those dates. Once we hear back from facilitators, we can lock those in, because I know the more notice you have, the easier it is to plan around work and family and other obligations. So with that, what I'd like to do is I have just some announcements to make, and then we will conclude our meeting and get everyone home. We're about 4 minutes over my plan, but that's not bad. I promised I was going to channel Dr. Bridges to get us out of here expeditiously, and with a man like Bridges, we often fall a little bit short. Did I say Taylor? No, I mean, I'm channeling, not challenging Dr. Taylor. I'm channeling Dr. Bridges, who set, a standard with his very efficient meetings as interim. So I did want to announce some changes to the committee structure. And this is based on my discussions with all of our board members. One thing that we would like to do is try to make our committee meetings more predictable, easier for people to schedule. If you're working, easier to set a work schedule around, easier for staff to know when meetings will be and planning their activities. And so the notion is that we will move all committee meetings to Tuesdays, the off Tuesdays from when we would normally meet. We would have a 1 o'clock meeting for one committee and a 3 o'clock meeting. And these would be in the weeks between our board meetings. I will talk to the new chairs about their preferences and then work with Melissa to let you know as soon as possible which committees will fall in the first week, 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock spot, and which ones will fall in that second week, first 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock slot. But I didn't want to announce that until we'd had a chance to talk to the committees, their chairs, and make sure that those work for everyone. But I'll start with our facilities committee, which will be our facilities and growth committee. That will be chaired by Mr. Hershey, and the vice chair will be Ms. Caulfield. I've talked to several of you, and this is why the questions about budget came up. The plan this year is that rather than have budget as a committee, we'll replace this with action and review by the full board. Dr. Taylor and I have talked about this. It seems like this is the budget process, the finance process is something everyone needs to be involved in. And I know that while everyone tries to be diligent about getting to as many committee meetings as possible, sometimes when we put something in its own committee, that sort of sets up an excuse sometimes if you're not on the committee not to attend or not to participate. And so to try to remove as many of those barriers, we'll do all of our budget and finance work as part of our work session. And if we, just as oftentimes finance fell before work session, then if we need to take some of that time to extend the work session, that's what we'll do. But this way we'll have everyone involved rather than a separate committee. Our Student Achievement Committee will be chaired by Mr. Swanson, vice chaired by the Vice Chair, Monica Johnson-Hostler. Our Policy Committee will be chaired by Lindsay Mahaffey, Vice Chair by Lynn Edmonds. Now, by removing one committee, this has allowed us to make room for another initiative that I've talked to several of you about and that I've talked to Dr. Taylor about. And you know, throughout our process, as we were looking for a new superintendent, we heard back from many people about the importance of community engagement and what we can do to improve our involvement, our communications, and our partnership with the community. And Dr. Taylor, I think this fits in very nicely with what you've done in your first 100 days and your launch. And as you know, with our strategic plan, we have our pathways to excellence and equity. And just for my term as chair, I want to lift up a 30 engagement. And so we're proposing that we are creating a engagement committee that will be designed to focus on district efforts to build relationships with families, community partners, and other local governments. This new committee will examine projects like volunteerism in our schools, our partnerships with nonprofits for mentoring, holding more public listening sessions throughout the county, like we saw with Southeast Raleigh High School, joint meetings with the county commission, as Ms. Edmonds had just mentioned, or just even having members go out and setting up regional meetings. Mr. Swanson had organized with some other leaders a meeting tonight for Western Wake County leaders to talk about education that unfortunately the weather has postponed. But that kind of idea, rather than these being one-offs, we would bring into a formal structure so that the public knows about the engagement work that we're doing, so that we can bring transparency to this and we can look at where, if people have questions about the volunteer process and how we manage volunteers, this can all be discussed in this committee forum. And I pitched the idea to my colleague, our vice chair, Ms. Monica Johnson-Hostler, if she would be willing to chair this effort in what I've called her capstone year. And she has graciously agreed to do this. And again, this is one that, again, like our Safety and Security Committee, you know, I would welcome everyone to participate. We will name formal committee members, and I'm going to hold off on naming a vice chair until we have everyone on board and we see how the rest of the committees pan out. But I wanted to take this opportunity to announce the creation of that committee. And then finally, we will have our Safety and Security Committee. That will continue. And I don't know that we've had a vice chair for that before, but I'd ask Dr. Ng to serve as the vice chair with me as the chair, remaining the chair of the committee. So all of our board members should have a vice chair position. We've announced the chairs and the vice chairs. I was going to announce just rank and file committee members, but then with the District 4 vacancy, we might have to shift a few things around. So I'll work with you individually over the next few days, lock that in, get that to Ms. Melissa Allen, and she will have that ready. Again, between now and then, I would encourage you to attend all of our committee meetings that you can, that you're interested in as possible. But then for our new committee chairs, to meet with the staff that are the representative of the committees. Our outgoing chairs, I know, have volunteered to work with you as you move into these leadership roles, and I will follow up with each of you individually. So those are our new committees, our new committee chairs, and our vice chairs, and that is the announcement of the shift in committee schedules. We'll work to nail that down, and the creation of the engagement committee. Dr. Taylor, are there any final thoughts or comments as we've talked about some of these ideas, or anything to close us out?
Mr. Chair, you've done a wonderful job, and I won't postpone anything. I think you've covered it all.
All right, then board members, thank you for coming out. Board members who've participated remotely, thank you. I know there's some technical challenges, but I really appreciate you all coming together and making this special meeting work today. With that, I will declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Caulfield. Thank you, Ms. Mahaffey. Thank you, Mr. Hershey.